Hello, welcome back to Exploring DC Episode 5. This is the show where we take a piece of DC media, whether that's movies, shows, comics, or more, and we talk about it. I am not alone today. I am with my co-host, Jalen Singleton. Jalen, how are you?
I'm doing really good, man. Doing really good. I got my DC encyclopedia right here open, and I'm ready to talk about this interesting topic that we got today.
This episode, Steel is obviously, that is the movie we're going to talk about today, which is a movie from 1997 starring Shaquille O'Neal. When a renegade military reject puts new super weapons in dangerous hands, John Henry Irons becomes Steel, wearing body armor, wielding a fearsome electro hammer, and riding a gadget-packed motorcycle. He's ready to wage war if he can fix the untimely glitches in his untested gear. The idea for this episode came because they did a NBA commercial for the new Superman movie coming out in the summer with Shaquille O'Neal in it. And I watched it and I'm like, I need to see Steel. Like it's been a movie that's been on my watch list of like one of those all-time bad superhero movies.
Yeah.
And this needs to be an episode. And now a couple weeks later, here we are.
Here we are. Here we are. I'll be real, I really thought the exact same thing when I saw it. I was like, dude, it is so hilarious. They're playing on this for Superman. And I mean, especially because like I was a huge fan of Chris Stuckman back in the day. And he used to do these things called Hilariosity reviews. And he did one for Steel, but I never watched it. So I was like, okay, let me go and watch this. I'm actually really excited to watch it for this week's episode. And I watch it and I feel pained. That was one of the roughest experiences I've ever had watching a movie, for sure.
I'm I'm so excited. There's no prefacing it. It is an all-time stinker of a comic book movie, but that's like the fun part of it is that it's so interesting. I'm gonna start you off with what is both your experience with the Steel character before, and then also what is your like prior experience of Shaq as a person? Are you a big NBA fan?
As for Shaq, I am a huge NBA fan. Like the Celtics
Uh-huh.
are my favorite NBA team of all time. Um, Ironically enough, that time where Shaq was on the Celtics was really bad, but that's a whole other conversation. But my introduction to Shaq was actually Kazam, seeing little clips
Oh no.
from yeah,
Uh-oh. Yeah.
seeing little clips from Kazam. I've never seen the actual Kazam movie. I've never, I do want to preface it with saying that, but seeing little clips from that and being like, okay, who is this goofy dude? And then to find out that he's a Hall of Famer, an All NBA player, like one of the best NBA players of all time, and I'm like, this goofy dude is the same guy who has multiple, who is in the Hall of Fame and has multiple All Star nods to his name. Um, it was interesting for sure. So I guess like my first introduction to Shaq was just to the word goofy. Just thinking this is the goofiest celebrity alive at this point. But my introduction to Steel actually came in the Justice League Unlimited series when I was younger. I remember there was an episode with I forget the characters that they focused on, but I do know that Steel and it was Steel and Stargirl maybe on the Watchtower and like they were the main focus of the episode. And I was like, dude, this dude is awesome. Because at first I thought he was Iron Man. And I was like, why is Iron Man in like I thought they were two different things. Mind you, I was like 7 or 8 at this time. So I didn't have a full understanding that Marvel and DC were two separate things and which heroes were which. But I remember looking at it and being like, dude, this dude is awesome. So then I ventured out and I read more of his stuff and I found out that he's basically like, what Falcon is to Captain America. That's what Steel is to Superman.
My experience of Steel is primarily nowadays based off the Superman and Lois show because they made him such a integral character to that show over the course of 4 seasons, and we got to see a really fleshed out version of the character that we didn't get to see here because they chose to ignore a lot of the comic stuff. But also, I was familiar with him because Death of Superman is one of the comics I've owned, and like I'm familiar with the Death of Superman and Reign of Superman and his origin. But I always felt like he was a character that could have gotten a lot more love when you talk about the Superman family and his supporting cast. I feel like he can get overlooked at times. And then in terms of Shaq, I'm very surface level NBA. Like I know as much about him as I do Jordan or LeBron or whatever you, but I always love everything with Shaq, like seeing all the memes and stuff. And
Oh
there's that
yeah.
TikTok video I love where Shaq goes on the street and he's like, I'm gonna see how long it takes until someone notices me. And then the first guy that walks by him is like, "Yo, what's up, Shaq?" and daps him up because this man is 7 foot. There's no hiding him. That's the
Not at
funniest
all.
thing about this movie is that he's trying to play a superhero with a masked identity, and he is the only 7 foot person in the entire movie. So it's
Yeah,
so obvious who Steel is.
he has such a peculiar figure. He has such a peculiar face, like a peculiar. He doesn't try to change his voice. He does not
No,
try to
not.
change his voice at all. You know, it is this movie, man. Oh my
I'm gonna go
goodness.
into a few off the tops. This was directed by Kenneth Johnson, who is most known for directing Xenon Girl of the 21st Century, which was like a Disney Channel original movie from, I think, the 90s. I remember, like, I'm familiar with it, but I haven't seen it. But he also worked on the Incredible Hulk and those TV movies that they did with Lou Ferrigno. He directed the first
Did
one, and he directed Bride of the Incredible Hulk. So this wasn't his first superhero movie. Essentially, he had done that and a couple of other like non-comic book related but superhero-esque stuff, like I think it's Atomic Woman and stuff like that. And he was very opposed to directing something like Steel because he wanted to move away from that genre. And what happened was they had the legendary producer Quincy Jones, who's done stuff like Color Purple. Quincy Jones came in with this idea, and he's like, "I love Steel. I love what he represents. That he's not like Superman, essentially with his powers. I want to bring him in and do a movie that's more street level." And that's how they pitched it to Kenneth Johnson. And that's why they ditched a lot of things like the cape. They ditched a lot of the superhero iconography. All the supporting cast is original characters. It was all based on this idea of like, we want to do a superhero movie that isn't actually a superhero movie. And that's where I feel like their big misstep was because it feels like they don't want to make what they're setting out to make with this character, if that
yeah,
makes sense.
I would for sure agree because even like, like the old man character and Sparky and all these other characters, even the villain, just having none of them be tied to DC Comics, I think that that was one of the film's biggest faults. And I know this film has multiple faults, like the lines of dialogue, certain moments in the movie, but taking for and it's interesting that you say that he didn't want to do a movie like this because you can really tell. Like in as a filmmaker, in some movies, that you watch, you can tell when a director or a writer doesn't really, or even an actor in some cases, doesn't really care about the project that they're making. And this is for sure one of those projects where you look at it and it's like there was no love for this whatsoever, except for from Shaq, actually. Ironically enough, it did feel like Shaq did come into this and have as good of a time as he possibly could. you know?
I think one of the initial things I was watching was like, how does, because we see sports stars do super, or like not superhero movies, but movies all the time. Like we saw LeBron James recently with Space Jam. I was like, how did Shaquille O'Neal in like the late 90s, he was still in the NBA, he was still flourishing. How did he have time to make this movie and Kazam and all that around that time? He
Yeah.
made this movie with 5 weeks of shoot time because he had to do the Summer Olympics that year, and he was training in Hawaii for the Lakers. So they worked
5
around his
weeks.
schedule. Yeah, he had one read through of the scripts before the Olympics, and then he memorized all his lines and he was good to go. I think his dedication is like there. Is his acting there? No, but you can tell that he was trying to put what he could into the role, and it's so charming.
Yeah,
Like
it
even though
is.
it's terrible.
Like it's so bad, but something about just Shaq's acting, it's like how bad it is, it makes it even more charming. Especially like the scene where they're in the Veterans Center and he
Uh-huh.
just with this random burst of super strength, he bursts the windows from the frame and is like, girl, you're getting out of here, and then just picks her wheelchair up and then walks out. It is one of the worst line deliveries from him in the movie. but it's so
And then
charming.
everyone's cheering when they're taking
Yeah.
this disabled woman out of the hospital. Like,
Yeah, I was dying. Yeah, because it's like when you see a big dude and like she's screaming no, she's screaming and she's crying, don't take me, and it's like bro has her and is just carrying her out, and he's walking out with a smile on his face while this girl is screaming no, and everyone is just like clapping, saying yeah,
as he
like.
smashed all the. It is so funny.
No, bro, I was
They ate
dying.
Shaq up in this movie. Everyone thinks Shaq's like the best, except for the villain. Everyone's he knows
Dude.
every kid in the neighborhood. His grandma loves him. Like
Yeah,
Shaquille is that guy. Honestly, too, if I'm gonna say like a bold off the bat, like I don't know about you. I've seen the Space Jam original a few times. I've seen A New Legacy. Those are the two movies I think of for like in terms of basketball stars doing film.
yeah.
I think he's putting way more here than Jordan or LeBron is. Even if you could argue that Jordan and LeBron are better in those movies, he is way more entertaining as like a persona.
Kind of like you said earlier, like it does feel like the dedication is there with him, especially like the moment where he is on the payphone right after he finds out that the weapons are being, distributed on the streets of Los Angeles or wherever he is. And you see him trying to give that angry performance, and like you can see some potential there. Like if he just had some classes, if he maybe took a little bit more time,
Right.
um, but comparing that to LeBron's acting in Space Jam 2, because that's the one that I remember the most. I watched Space Jam 1 when I was a kid, and I don't think I've had a rewatch since. So I don't really remember how Jordan was in that movie. But remembering how LeBron was in Space Jam: A New Legacy, it was just terrible. It
Yeah.
was awful.
It
Uh,
was really bad.
yeah. Yeah, and even LeBron's acting in the House Party reboot. Have you seen that movie from 2023?
Yeah, you just brought back a memory that I
Oh, did I?
forgot that I had watched that movie and LeBron was in
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
LeBron's cameo and LeBron's scene in that movie is Shaq's acting in this is encompasses all of whatever LeBron has done in media.
It's one of those things where like I know this movie and Kazam were bad, but I would have loved to see more of Shaq and particularly in like a supporting role. Because I think if he would have continued on with acting, he would have gotten a lot better. I mean, even if you look at Dwayne Johnson, who started off terrible with like the Scorpion King, he's
Oh yeah,
not great now, but he has gotten considerably. Same with Cena. Cena, when you look at his first couple movies of like Bumblebee and stuff, it's pretty rough. But now he's doing Peacemaker and he's doing all this other stuff and he's getting a lot better. I think Shaq would have been the same thing. He really had like a comedic energy to him. And I was looking at what other movies he had done. And did you ever see Uncle Drew that came out in like around 2018?
yeah, bro.
Uh,
I love Uncle Drew. I
yes.
I absolutely love Uncle Drew. Yeah.
I remember Shaq being in that movie and being a lot of fun. I'm like, I wish he just kept going with this, especially now that he's retired for the most part. Like, let's keep him going. Let's get him back out there.
Yeah, honestly, why not put him, make him, an older character in Superman, and have him have a hammer and just make one funny pun or something like that, in Superman. But you look, he just brought back, the fond memories of Uncle Drew because I absolutely love that movie. Like it is so goofy, but as far as like hoopers who can act, you just reminded me that Kyrie Irving, he actually had some
He's pretty
acting
good.
chops. Yeah, he
Yeah.
actually like there are moments where, granted, while it's not like on the level of like scores, on the level of DiCaprio or Timothy Chalamet or anything like that, nowhere near that level. I think when um even like certain moments between Shaq and or Kyrie's character, Uncle Drew, sometimes you do have to think and be like, oh wow, these are these people aren't actually elderly. These people aren't actually this age. It low
Right.
key sucks you in a little bit. Like especially Shaq. Shaq actually surprised me, which, like you said, I do wish he would do more stuff, um, more acting opportunities like this, because I feel like he loves it. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I feel like he loves that process, and I feel like he wants to keep being on TV and wants to keep doing all this stuff. he doesn't get it. But if Marshawn Lynch can keep getting opportunities, and Marshawn Lynch is not great,
Oh, he's
I
so
feel like
funny.
yeah, I feel
Marshawn.
like Shaq I feel like Shaq can get more opportunities.
Yeah, like even we'll get into like Steel as a character in the comics and how they messed all that up. I want to get into some of the other characters that are all these are all original characters, but I found some of them pretty interesting. They had Annabeth Gish as Sparky, who is Shaq's military friend who gets disabled early on in the movie.
Yeah.
Apparently, according to IMDb, she's based on Oracle, and that was like the impression I got is that they were trying to do something similar. Obviously, like the obvious
Yeah.
parallels of Oracle also being disabled and working
Mhm.
behind a computer and stuff. I actually thought she was pretty fun as like a supporting character. I didn't actually dislike her.
Yeah, I didn't dislike her or is his name Uncle Sam? I don't
Uncle
fully
Joe.
remember. Uncle Joe, Uncle Joe, yes. I actually didn't hate either one of their characters. When it comes to an acting standpoint, they
Oh,
weren't
no
they
one's
weren't
great.
bad. Yeah, yeah, no one is great, but how I looked at it is they were working with what they had and they were
Yeah,
trying to do the best with what they had for 5 weeks. You know what I mean? They
right.
probably only did like one take for most of it, and it
Most
was
of
like,
it.
oh, this is what we're going with. Let's move on.
The Uncle Joe's played by absolute film legend Richard Roundtree, Shaft himself, who's did so much
Yeah.
like black exploitation movies in the 70s. He is so funny every time I see him in a movie. And this movie in particular, Uncle Joe is just off his rocker. I don't know understand why he's there. I don't understand his purpose. Even when like Shaq's getting injured, he's like, Shaq's fine. His dad
Yeah.
was fine too. And then Sparky's like, his dad died. He's like, yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that. I'm like,
That's
Uncle
so
Joe,
that's so
what
out
is
of
your
pocket.
purpose?
Yeah, that is such an out
He
of
was,
pocket line.
oh man, he was making me laugh. So same with I thought the grandma played by Irma P. Hall was
Oh
also just
yeah.
very funny. That she had no purpose in the movie other than to be like, I'm making these souffles. I gotta make all this food. She
Yeah.
like the people full on break into her house. She has no reaction to these the SWAT agents hitting
Yeah, breaking
her
it up.
grandson down, but she like sees her souffle fall out. And she's like, damn it.
That souffle. Yeah. What was even funnier, right, is that she, I guess, felt like if you whisper, then the souffle will come out right. Because every single time that Shaq and the little kid played by Ray J of all people,
Yeah,
um,
home video
when
legend Ray J.
yeah, home video, home video legend Ray J, when they walk into the house and she's like, shh, shh, it's a surprise, I'm trying to make this souffle, and whenever someone raises their voice or yells, it's like, oh no, the souffle is ruined, you know.
I thought it was so funny how they tried to do this super dramatic scene with her and Shaq where she's trying to pry it out of him that he's Steel and like she's
Yeah.
really concerned about him. And they're doing it in the whisper voice the whole time. And I'm like, I can't take this serious. Like, what are we?
Yeah.
It was
It
so
makes it
funny.
it makes me wonder what whoever wrote this script, what they were thinking when they were like, "Oh, yeah, we gotta have this emotional moment, but still play into this goofy bit that we have for this
Yeah.
scene, of them constantly whispering something the souffle isn't ruined."
When I saw Ray J in the cast, I did a double take. And then
Same here.
I was trying, I guess I didn't piece it together, even though I know what he looks like, that it was Martin. I just assumed he was older. So I was like looking at the gang of criminals and stuff. I'm like, which one's Ray J? Is it that eye patch guy? And then I'm looking at the cast list. I'm like, he's the kid. I didn't realize he was that young. Or like he just looks
Yeah.
so young in this movie. And he
Yeah,
plays such a
funnily
young character.
funnily enough, I didn't know it was I didn't look at the cast list or anything. Like I said, I went in completely blind, only knowing
Yeah,
that
same.
Shaq was playing John Henry Irons. But looking at when this kid comes in and he starts like making jokes and stuff, and I'm like I legitimately lean up to my computer and I'm like, is that no, that's a Ray J. And so then I looked it up and I was like, bro, they really had Ray J in this movie. Home video legend Ray J.
Home
Uh,
video legend Ray J. The other last main cast member that I wanted to touch on was Judd Nelson as Nathaniel Burke, who's also a decently big actor at the time. He was in Breakfast Club. I thought this
Mm.
villain was terrible. I that
I
he got
remember.
away with so much. There was just no like the when the opening scene, not opening scene, but a few scenes in where he traps the people in the elevator and just full on kills people, and there's no repercussions. This man's getting away with
Yeah,
the police in this movie are terrible. Like
they're
no wonder
bad.
they need Shaq.
They are
They
awful.
can just get away with anything in this movie,
They can't,
especially him.
and that's like honestly, that was the thing that I wanted to talk to you the most about because at the beginning of it's the whole aspect of repercussions for Burke in this movie
Mhm.
because at the beginning of the movie you see him say like obviously Shaq testifies against him and is like yeah he changed the setting so then it would be a more powerful reaction which therefore killed their lieutenant and crushed Sparky's legs and caused her to not be able to walk, right? So
Yeah.
how is it that Burke was able to get away with that and then proceeds to put these weapons out on the street? And it's not like he's doing it secretly. He's doing it out of like a warehouse with multiple people and then just walking the streets, giving it to these
Right.
gangs. Uh,
It's like a
uh,
big company.
yeah,
It's
it is
not a hidden operation at all.
exactly. It is a huge company, and for the police, when you see these big weapons on the street, and even like the army, like when Shaq calls his old lieutenant or his old sergeant or whoever, and is like, "Yeah, we got these weapons on the street now. How did they get them?" The lieutenant just says nothing, or the sergeant is just like, "Oh, we shouldn't worry about it." His concern is if Shaq is on a secure line. That took me out, man.
I even like when they're chasing Shaq down in the middle of the movie and he goes to hide in the junkyard and Sparky's like, it's okay, they'll just see a junk pile. And then you just hear the overhead of the cops being like, where did Shaq go? All I see is junk. Maybe you should look in the junkyard for a second.
Yeah.
They they were just like, ah damn, he got away. What do we do? It was so funny, bro. Like I don't even think that Shaq is being a problem. I think he's the only one actually trying to do stuff. Everyone else in enforcement is absolutely should be
Yeah.
fired. This is a terrible government system that they got set
Yeah,
up in this
exactly.
DC universe.
How oh my goodness, man. How Shaq was able to take this whole operation down in the matter of what, 2 nights while the police this whole thing seems like it had been going on for a while before Shaq came back. Yeah, which more specifically, why this neighborhood of all neighborhoods was Burke purposefully trying to get back at John or
I think so. I think that was kind of the input, but also that he could more easily get out these weapons in like a street area like this, I suppose was their intention. But
yeah.
none of it's really planned out to the level that you would imagine. I wanted to ask you though, how did you feel? Because this is not based on any DC comics. There's no inspiration for like different runs that this story is based on. How did you feel about the overall story of these super weapons getting put out on the street, these experimental stuff? I I didn't hate that like concept as a film idea. I just thought the weapons were super lame. Like every time they shoot someone, it's
Yeah.
just like a little fire blast and they
Yeah.
don't even die. And I'm
Yeah.
like, we're hyping up these weapons to be the most lethal, terrible things. They're about to start like World War III, and they can't even fully kill someone.
Yeah, especially like with this whole like power blast or whatever that they have.
Mm,
It was very stupid. I feel like from my I guess from the comic side of things, this happens all the time in DC. LexCorp or whatever puts these weapons out on the street and or Intergang, which I
yeah.
believe they touched on a little bit kind of close to the end of the DCEU's lifespan. But Intergang will put these weapons out on the street and it'll be up to Superman or it'll be up to Batman or it'll be up to any of these Green Arrow or any of these other heroes to put a stop to it. I feel like actually from a comic perspective, it would have been better if you made the villain Intergang or if you made the villain, LexCorp or something like that. You could have. I mean, it's DC, it's Warner Brothers. You have all these characters at your disposal. You can mention Superman and not have him in the movie. You can mention, Lex Luthor and not have him in the movie. Maybe if you don't want to, or if they didn't want to include Lex Luthor in his entirety, maybe they could have had like a lackey or something. Maybe Mercy Graves is running the entire
Yeah.
operation, and like you just hear of Lex Luthor in the background, well, that he's, obviously this is his company, but Mercy is the CEO of this sector of LexCorp, of the weapons sector of LexCorp. So then you put the LexCorp weapons on the street. You don't have any mention. You don't have to have any mention of Superman. You don't have to have any mention of Lex Luthor. You just have Mercy Graves and Steel. You know.
That's what confused me the most is because I get the concept of, hey, we don't want to lead into like the fantastical elements of the character in the world, so we're going to go for a more grounded approach. But this happened a lot in the early zeros, late 90s, anything before like X-Men, where they were just like, let's pivot away from the comics entirely and do a bunch of original characters. You see it obviously in Catwoman is like the one I think of too, where they did
Oh,
completely different stuff. They have street level characters in DC all over the place. Like you said, Mercy Graves, Inner Gang. You
mhm.
could have formed a story with characters that are already fleshed out, but instead you chose Uncle Joe and Lieutenant Burke, and I'm just kind of flabbergasted by a lot of the story decisions here because they could have done a really cool grounded steel adaptation that was based in the comics lore, but I think in the time with the people they had in charge, that just wasn't something they were looking for.
I guess now that I know about the whole 5 weeks thing, it doesn't excuse making a bad movie whatsoever. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, it does make you feel like there's a little bit of grace, especially with knowing Shaq's dedication to it and knowing everything like that. But I do feel like, there are multiple characters in DC who don't have superpowers who are street level, where you could have just simply thrown them in as the benefactors instead of Burke, or make Burke somebody. Like make Burke this maybe keep him as Burke, but maybe make him sell to Inner Gang, or maybe have
Right,
him be the lead of Inner Gang. You don't have to make him an existing character. You can make him an original character who's the leader of an existing gang. That leaves you with like open to so much more possibilities because you're dealing with a group instead of one individual. You know what I mean? And then that would also tie it closer to DC. But I guess with their vision, they were like, yeah, let's separate this completely from the source material and let's make our own story about basically the savior from the hood, the savior from the ghetto, and make
right.
it this strong, kind of like Spike Lee esque. Definitely taking inspiration from Spike Lee and definitely taking inspiration from other black filmmakers and other black exploitation films. Obviously, with having Shafts in this movie, the Shaft actor in this movie, Richard Roundtree in this movie. But looking at that and you know trying to make this more of a separate story, I guess I could see why they didn't include any nods to like any other DC comics, anything, but it still would have elevated it. And I think that's where a lot of creatives, even just today, we can talk about it all the time, how, that's where we are with Marvel. And I mean, you're hiring all these people who don't care about the source material and who want to do something different. But when it comes to dealing with comics and when it comes to dealing with these characters that are supposed to be larger than life, sometimes straying away from the source material isn't the best thing for the story.
Yeah, because you can have successful deviations from the lore and go in your own directions. I'm thinking of like we talked about it the other day, but the Watchmen 2019 TV show is a clear departure from stuff they did in the original comic, but I really liked that version of it. This one, it felt like they were embarrassed of the source material, but at the same time, they still have Shaq in the metal suit and a big hammer walking around, and I'm like, you're already halfway there. You're already doing a little bit of ridiculousness. Let's just go full in on what people love about the character. Even like small things. He doesn't wield the hammer at all. He just holds it. And like sometimes he uses the metal ability to bring people, and then he uses it as a gun, which I actually thought was kind of cool when he like puts the gun on the motorcycle. I was like, that's cool, actually. But I don't even like that's a simple thing. That's not even a fantastical thing of you want to see Steel wield his hammer. Why can't I just see
Exactly.
small things for the character?
Exactly.
I wanted to get into the suit too. How do we feel
Oh
about it?
boy.
Because it's supposed to be made of steel. It's moving around like rubber. The helmet
Y-
does not fit Shaq's head. It's
Yeah,
kind of a mess.
It is a mess. I can see what they were trying to go for though, because
Yeah.
the like kind of like I said when I was a kid, like I thought that was Iron Man, when I was younger. So he does have he does have a suit that covers his entire body, at least his suit in the 90s and in the Death of Superman, you know. So I could see what they were trying to go for. And at that time, making more comic book suits did not go well, except for like Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman with the 70s series. But it was just bad. Which actually, I wanted to bring up a funny moment that I think is a blooper, but I want
Yeah.
to get your opinion on this. When he's running from the cops and he's on the rooftop, and that piece of metal falls off of his suit, and he looks down. That is the best acting that Shaq gives in this entire movie. Because it seems real, like it seems like that wasn't
That
supposed
just
to
fell off.
happen. Yeah, when it just fell off, and he makes like a little face, and he just picks it up and then jumps off the roof. You know what I mean? It,
Yeah, but then they played off really good when they're like, the suit needs some work. It's all falling apart. I didn't trust the validity of it. I'm like, okay. But clearly this thing is just holding on with like the absolute bare necessities.
yeah, like bro, when he does that, I was thinking, I was like, bro just decided to lock in with his acting one time just for this one moment. And I guess now that I know this whole 5 weeks thing, which is absolutely crazy that you made a whole feature
Uh,
film based on a superhero with large sets, like at that time, no green screen, no nothing, like
well,
this is
as
all
far as I
practical,
know,
you know?
it was Shaq had 5 weeks to film, but he is the main character. I think other people had like other months to work on all that other stuff. Obviously, I don't think you could get a whole production done in 5 weeks. But in terms of
Yeah.
like your main character's steal, which is in, I would say 70-80% of your scenes only having 5 weeks, that's the crazy part where I'm like, okay, you probably had to work around him pretty heavily.
Yeah, I would say even like 90%, because I'm gonna be real, I can't think of the moments where Shaq isn't on screen, maybe can add up to like 4 minutes and a half. I know the most obvious one is the elevator scene, where Burt
Hmm.
kills those people, and then I guess the security guard for those people just looks in horror, and his eyebrows just start raising up and down, like
Yeah.
trying to keep this distraught performance. And Burke is just like, I need someone I can trust. Do you want to do you want to come with me? And then the security guard just whistles out and is like, yeah.
Yeah.
And
No
then he just
energy to it.
that energy just
He wasn't
leaves.
even scared, man. He was just like, yeah, all right, sure.
Yeah, he says yeah. Then Burke walks off with this cheesy grin, and then just kind of like bops his head as he's walking off in the background. And then you leave this agent or the security guard here just like looking, trying his hardest to give a distraught performance while he looks at this elevator where his boss has just died. This movie, man.
I will say one of the things that confused me that I really would have liked to see more of is he has the tattoo that's like the Man of Steel and the Superman logo, and then they
Mm-hmm.
even have a close-up shot of it. I don't know if Shaq just had that tattoo and they like used it in the movie or if it was like something they added to it. But my thing was is like I feel like we could have easily weaved in, maybe didn't have to tie into the Reeve movies, but it could have been like, hey, I'm inspired by Superman in this world, so I'm gonna become that for my neighborhood, even though I don't have powers. And then you could have even incorporated the crest on his suit. But I'm wondering if they were afraid to tie it too much into Superman and they just wanted to make it as standalone as possible.
Yeah, I actually think that's a real tattoo that Shaq has, because I know that Shaq is a huge Superman fan. Like when it comes to, I mean, that's low key why he has a little bit of a beef with Dwight Howard. That's why I feel like he has a little bit of beef with Dwight Howard, because Dwight Howard does that whole Superman motif, and obviously Shaq gives him some trouble for it. But I do, from what I know of Shaq and from what I've seen of like interviews and stuff like that, Shaq is a huge, huge, huge Superman fan. I even believe that Shaq read his comics, what as a kid, and I think that's part of the reason why Shaq wanted to play this character so much, and why you could see that he puts in a little bit more effort than other people, because Shaq actually cares. Like he actually cares about this character. Now, granted, while it's not good in any term, in any sense of the word, it's not great.
Yeah.
You can feel that passion for the source material, and I do, to give Shaq and to give this movie that credit. That is what I think we need a little bit more of in superhero movies, are actors and people who genuinely care about these characters and who genuinely care about these stories. Like that's why I feel like the DCU is gonna be good, because James Gunn genuinely cares about this world. You know, he will. You know, even though it may not come out great to the audience, which I have no doubt it will, but if it doesn't come out great to the audience, I'm sure that James Gunn won't mind, because he put his best foot forward, and he went in with that love for Superman. He went in with that love for this world and for the comics and everything like that. But I do agree with you. Like, I feel like it could have been an emotional moment for even like the conversation with his grandma, the one that we make fun of, because, the whisper conversation that we just can't take seriously. If they take out the whispering, and if you add in maybe, or if they added in maybe a conversation where, maybe she's mentioning how the world is changing and how there's people who can fly now, and how this sector, like the ghetto or the hood, isn't getting protected as much, and that use that as an emotional beat for John Henry Irons' motivation, of like, I want to stand up for the little guy. I want to protect the place that I come from, because it's not getting protected by those big wigs or by those big people. I'm inspired by him for his power, and I can do this like how he's doing for Metropolis or Smallville or wherever. I can do that for where I'm from. I can do that for my hood. I can do that for here. So I mean, I agree with you. It could have been used as a great emotional story beat for this story, for sure.
That's the frustrating part. Is I see like the pieces of what they were going for, and I actually don't dislike it. I like a
No.
lot of what they were trying to do. It's just so bad how they executed everything, and I think they just, like you
Yeah.
said, didn't put a lot of care and love into the final product. And whether that's like the Kenneth Johnson, the production team, or if it was, some of the people on set, I don't know, but it felt like no one besides Shaq really showed
Yeah.
up to play. And you can see that. I mean, the other thing I wanted to ask is, obviously this came out about 10 years after Superman 4 and the end of the Reeves era, which was kind of the defining era of superhero media for a bit. Do you think that they ever planned to maybe tie this into that, or do you think they were trying to distance themselves because Quest for Peace did so poorly, and also maybe because at this point, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, me and Jackson, with the Christopher Reeve documentary, I believe Christopher Reeve was paralyzed at this point, and they weren't going to do obviously any more Superman stuff with him, so
Yeah.
maybe they didn't want to tie it into that universe at all.
That's an interesting, I guess, question, or interesting thing to explore, because there are so many factors that play into it, maybe behind the scenes that we don't know, or that we can only speculate about. Because maybe,
Uh,
I mean, obviously from what we know, the director wasn't really too passionate about the story and wanted to go for something different, with the whole protector from the ghetto, protector from the hood type thing, right? But with Superman, maybe that could have been a thing at one point. Um, what I may would think is, maybe it was a thing at one point, and maybe the Warner Brothers heads, or whoever was at the seat of the table at that point, maybe put a mandate on it. It was like, let's not include Superman, because they put, for some reason, I hate when Warner Brothers does this, but they put embargoes on using characters for certain mediums and for certain projects.
yep.
So
There's a long history of that.
yeah, so maybe the first draft of the script included a reference to Superman. Maybe not an appearance, maybe not even an appearance to Metropolis or whatever. Maybe just a small reference to Superman. And maybe the heads were like, "Oh, we had this big thing go on. Superman, you know how they think. The last Superman failed, so if we have anything tying to Superman in this movie, then it's obviously doomed to fail too." You know what I mean? So maybe they were like, we like it, but let's take out Superman, because we want to stray the public's minds as far away from Superman as we possibly can. Especially
Yeah.
with Quest for Peace failing. They want to, and obviously at this time was, I think, peak time where people were like, oh yeah, Superman is boring. Superman is not an interesting character in the slightest. So for them, they're just thinking about the money aspect. They're thinking about the audience reception of it. So they're like, Superman equals poor reception at this point. So let's take him out.
Yeah, the late 90s were that era where a lot of your classic superhero stuff was not doing great. Superman was obviously kind of on the back burner. Batman and Robin was coming out this same year, which
Oh
killed the
boy.
brand for, however many years. And the
Yeah.
90s, as you know from comics, were like that period where we introduced Venom and like Captain America with like the huge pecs and everything was
Oh
dark and
yeah.
gritty and cool. Like
Yeah.
it was that era where we were just trying to appeal to kids and stuff. And that's even where I think Shaq came in because originally they wanted Kenneth Johnson wanted Wesley Snipes of all people because it's interesting because Wesley
Wow.
Snipes played Blade right the year after this movie came out, but they wanted Wesley
Yeah.
Snipes, and then studio execs were like, Shaq is going to sell more merch and appeal to kids more, so let's go with Shaq.
Wow. No, that's crazy
And
because it's crazy because like right after, sorry to cut you off, but like right after,
no,
it's crazy because Blade is what in some people saved superhero films.
uh
That's so ironic.
yeah. So we could have got a completely different type of. I don't think it would have been that much better with
Yeah,
Wesley
no,
Snipes, but
for sure.
it would have been maybe a little more serious of an adaptation than doing it
Yeah.
with Shaq. Even Shaq, they offered him a Milestones character called Hardcase first, is what they wanted him to play in a movie, which is kind of a more niche DC character. But he
Yeah.
was like, I want to do Steel, and I attach more, obviously because of his love for Superman and stuff. So that's where everything kind of fell into place. It's it's just such an interesting period of history that I am so happy that we got to finally watch it because I've been
Yeah.
so curious how this got made, how this all happened, and I now see the pieces of like where they were going for, why it happened. It's fascinating to me, and I wish that people talked about it more.
Yeah, because we can see the potential. Like we just spent however long talking about the potential of this movie, and even though it is a terrible, terrible, awful
Terrible movie.
movie, there is still a story there, and it's so many things that went on behind the scenes that may have not led to, it may not be as bad as like, oh, this production was just like like a bunch of trash, a bunch of garbage or whatever. There were actual things like the whole 5 weeks aspect, the whole thing of them wanting Wesley Snipes, maybe Quest for Peace failing, like small things that led to this production going the way that it went.
Mhm.
Um, that's still crazy that Wesley Snipes, they wanted him originally for this project. It is so wild how stuff works out. Because didn't Blade come out like a year later?
A year later, yeah. I
Yeah.
think the other interesting thing to talk about that time is obviously now we've had a few more superhero movies with black led heroes, and Black Panther was a big cultural moment. But
Hmm.
in the 90s, in the span of 2 years, we got the Spawn movie, we got this movie, Steel, and then we
I
also
forgot about
got
Spawn.
Blade, which spawned Blade 2 and Blade 3. It felt like we were going in a really cool direction with a lot of black superheroes, and we could have got more. But
Hmm.
then even though Blade did successful, everything just kind of petered off for a while until we got Black Panther, and now we see a lot of that stuff now. But I was
Yeah.
wondering your thoughts about that because it felt like a moment was happening in the late 90s and it just kind of got cut off.
Yeah, it did. I think, and this is from my Marvel side of knowledge too, is that originally Phase One of what Marvel was supposed to include like Nick Fury and Black Panther, but Ike
Mhm.
Perlmutter, who was the head of Marvel at the time, was like, "Oh no, black superheroes and women-led projects don't sell." Obviously, we know that's
Right.
not true. We know that, yeah, I mean, obviously, like you have projects like Black Panther that have released and that have done very, very, very well, like $1 billion. So obviously he was treated wrong, but that could only lead to more executives, or I can't help but think that more executives thought that way at the time, especially because segregation and racism in Hollywood and sexism in Hollywood and misogyny in Hollywood was very, very, very big in the 90s and the 80s and the 70s.
Yeah.
Even now, like one of my favorite lines from Barbie is that patriarchy is still a thing. They're just better at hiding it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Racism and misogyny will always, I think, unfortunately, be a thing in Hollywood and in these big stages where entertainment is the thing because you're trying to sell. You're trying to sell a person. You're trying to sell a brand. You're trying to even sell a stereotype. You know what I mean? And especially a movie like this where you see a strong black character trying to make him a hero of sorts and kind of make him a protector of the hood, a protector of these lower income areas. Same with Blade, a really, really, really cool, sick vampire hunter who is a vampire himself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? While those movies are successful, these executives may find any reason that they possibly can to be like, oh no, this wasn't it. This didn't sell. And maybe Blade Trinity was their thing. Maybe they were holding out to see how that Trinity or how that trilogy of films did, and then once Blade Trinity hit and once it was bad, oh, that's it. This
Right.
is this is this
Yeah.
is why
It
we
just
don't
caught.
make these type of stories. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just another fascinating point of history where it doesn't feel like there would be this much of a cultural movement in the late 90s, but there was, and it just kind of got cut off. And then we didn't resume that until late in the 2010s. And now in the early 2020s, we're seeing a lot better representation. But it's
Yeah.
fascinating, again, just that a Steel movie happened because, like, if you go back to the late 90s, I'm thinking they're going to focus on primarily white bread characters like Batman and Superman. And to see a character like John Henry Irons is just, it's pretty cool, even if it didn't work
Yeah.
out as much as
Yeah.
it did.
Yeah, I always love, and this is one thing that I'll always say, like, I love any sort of superhero film. I think that even though this movie was bad, I think
Yeah.
that it was still cool to even see John Henry Irons adapted. You know what I mean? And it was cool that someone cared enough and someone saw this comic enough to be like, you know what? Let me adapt that. Let me, and even though maybe the director and the writer didn't have a care in the world for this character, but Shaq did. And as a comic book fan, as someone to where comics have gotten me through a lot, and at times, even when I'm feeling stressed, I just pick up a comic and I read. You know, it is always good to know that these superheroes and comic books in general have provided people with so much enjoyment that they're like, you know what, let me make my art based off of this character. Let me make my art based off of this comic book. That's always a beautiful thing to me. And it's cool to see, it's cool to see Steel getting adapted. It's cool to see, I'm sure this podcast will get to it at some point, but Swamp Thing and Catwoman and all these
Oh
other
yeah.
lower level characters being adapted for the big screen or even for TV screens. And I'm also happy that this didn't scare them from trying it again with Wool Parks. Wool Park was that his name? Wole
Wole
Parks.
Parks, yeah, from
Yeah,
Superman and
Wole Parks.
Lois.
Mr. Ben and Lois. Yeah, and that adaptation was fire. Like from what I've
Yeah, I
seen,
loved it.
it was phenomenal. But that show is phenomenal. But yeah, that's
All right.
that's for me for sure. My feelings
I
on it.
I think that's a honestly a great note to leave it on. I think we're both in agreement. Not the best movie,
Yeah.
but it led to a really fun discussion. It was not a boring bad movie. It was interesting to me.
Yeah, it
I
was.
I was very fascinated. I have a couple quick trivia things. Obviously, I talked a lot about the production and Shaq and stuff. Um, the box office for this was 1.7 million on a budget of 16 million. So it absolutely
Bombed hard.
tanked.
Oh
Batman
my
and Robin,
goodness.
in comparison, which came out the same year, made more money than this did in its first weekend. So yeah,
Wow.
it actually
That's
had the
crazy.
biggest second weekend drop for a superhero movie before the Marvels came out a couple years ago. Like the
What?
78 or it was 87% drop. It was a crazy big. This thing, I don't know. It tanked. I would have went to see it though. I would have been fascinated by it.
Yeah, yeah. I
So,
I, I also would have went to see it, which also, fun fact, Captain America was close to that. I think Captain America was at an 86% drop.
oh boy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
but
tough. Shaq had to do all his stunts because they couldn't find a 7-foot stunt double. I think the stunts aren't good in this movie, but it's more respectable when you realize it's Shaq like jumping from buildings and stuff, and even like you talked about that blooper moment where his thing falls off. Like it's not,
Yeah.
it's all in camera stuff for Shaq, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, there was a moment actually because I'm happy you brought that up because I was wondering when he's chasing that really bad chase with that guy and he's like it's on now and he chases him through that railroad and it is the
Yeah,
slowest chase scene I think I have ever seen in my life. But when the guy is jumping fences and Shaq hits a move where he does like a cartwheel off the fence. I was like
yeah.
there's no way that's actually Shaq. I didn't know Shaq could be able to move like that, but to know that he did it, that's the type
It
of
has it.
dedication that you appreciate. But it's so goofy. But that is the type of dedication that you appreciate with this
That scene's so
movie.
cool, and then it's immediately followed by the lamest rescue where the guy is like, "You're gonna die on these slow-moving train tracks," and he knocks his head, and Shaq just like pulls him a little bit
Yeah,
out of
Shaq
the
just
way.
like drags him off, but leaves him right there, right by the train
Yeah,
tracks.
doesn't make
You know,
sure he's okay.
and, and, then-
It's
and, and then like his theme comes in as he slowly drags this guy off the train tracks, and then runs after the guy.
Oh, I was gonna say I really liked the steel theme, as goofy as it is.
I did too.
I was like vibing along with it. I'm like, this is actually it was composed by a guy named Mervyn Warren, who is a five-time Grammy winner. So they didn't hire someone like for a lot of these stuff that didn't have the credits. It's just like interesting. The rest of the music though, besides the theme, is very Disney Channel TV movie type
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
But that theme, this is good energy for the steel theme.
Yeah, I was also vibing with it too. Like I'm sure that Jackson could tell you up and down what the ins and out of the score, but from a surface level, from someone who is not a scorehead like Jackson, like
Right.
I
Like it
was
was
looking
good.
at it was good. Like I was vibing to it, and honestly, I look he got a little hyped whenever those same three notes or whatever came in.
Speaking of music, Shaq worked on the soundtrack and he put out an original single called Man of Steel, which had people like Ice Cube on it. And I was listening to it and I'm like, this is he tried to do rapper at the same time as actor, and both of them didn't end up really working out. But
Oh my
I
goodness.
think rapper he was at least somewhat better at than actor,
I
even though he put
believe
his dedication to both.
Yeah, I believe that I've heard it, but it's been a while.
Yeah.
It has been a long time, but I can imagine. I can imagine. That's just what you gotta respect from Shaq is that he's willing to try this stuff. Because that could also spawn a conversation just based off of like sports and how sports had this stigma, especially in the '90s. Coming off of that Magic Johnson, Larry Bird era, where it's just about messing with as many women as you can, making as much money as you can. And then you have people like Shaq coming out here doing superhero movies, goofy superhero movies at that, being in a costume and all this other stuff. It is super respectable, for sure.
Yeah. And then this is the one I found the most fascinating. So you are somewhat familiar. Tim Burton, who we talked about, who directed Batman in 1989, was going to do a movie called Superman Lives with Nicolas Cage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Back in, I think it's the late 90s, or early zeros maybe, that what he was doing. I don't remember
Yeah.
the timeline, but they wrote a scene in that where John is in a ballroom, like John Henry Irons, the character, where other characters are in there, Clark and Lois and stuff. And he was going to get killed by Brainiac slash Lex Luthor with a ray gun or whatever it is. But they wrote that scene with the idea of Shaq reprising his role as like an apology for this movie of like seeing him get killed on screen. So he would have just been called John and he would have got shot. And that's so fascinating that they were going to be that mean to Shaq. Like imagine Shaq agreed to do that and signs up.
What? Yo, that is
Yeah.
actually crazy. Because I've heard close to nothing about Superman Lives, which I'm actually very excited to see. Like if we do an episode on like that production or just on that movie leading up to James Gunn's Superman. But that's crazy. But that also like it's not it wasn't Shaq's fault, like
It wasn't Shaq's fault.
yeah, like Shaq gave it his all. He went out there, he worked, he learned his lines in 5 weeks and got all the movements down, did his own stunts, which is even more impressive because so many actors who are much better and who have done much worse. Not much worse. This is a really bad movie, but who
Yeah,
have done close to as bad of a superhero movie as this movie was, didn't do their own stunts. Like didn't even do the bare minimum, and I
right.
think that is what I respect the most about this movie and about Shaq is that regardless of how the movie came out, terrible, regardless of how it came
Yes.
out, um Shaq still gave it his all. And when you're a filmmaker and you're making art of any kind, whether it be a superhero film, whether it be an indie film, whether it be a conveyor belt studio film, like a sequel or a legacy sequel of sorts. It is still cool and it is still inspiring and it is still respectable to see people who are part of the production, whether that be actors, writers, directors, who give it their all,
Yeah.
regardless of how the movie comes out.
Regardless, it's always just the
Yeah.
passion is what draws you to it, no matter what.
Yeah.
So I have two final points I wanted to ask. One, so obviously this episode and us recording is completely based off that commercial with Shaq and James Gunn and David Corenswet.
Yeah.
Now that the DCU is starting, A, do we want to see Shaq come back to the superhero genre in some way? Whether that's like a multiversal Steel cameo or he's playing like just a cameo in a new character. And two, do we want to see John Henry Irons like early in the DCU or do we want to wait till Superman's more established and to see give
So
some
this
time?
Yeah, this is actually really interesting. I think for the Shaq part, I would like to
Because
see
I would
him in a
love to see him.
cameo. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
I would love to see him in a cameo of some sorts, not playing John Henry Irons. Just
No.
give this man something else. Especially because like that was almost 30 years ago. Obviously his acting has gotten better now with Uncle
Hmm.
Drew and with commercials and other things that he's done. Even like the Superman commercial that he did, it wasn't bad. It wasn't,
Yeah. He's a
yeah,
fun guy.
yeah. He's a fun guy. So, give him something. It would make my
Batman.
heart. Give him Batman. Yeah, you know what? Give him Batman. It would make my heart happy. But on the Steel aspect of the conversation, I feel like um I would like to see him early on. The thing that gets me though is this whole 6 year plan thing. Is like
Yeah.
instead of a 10 year plan, a 6 year plan. And I don't know if James Gunn is planning on bowing out. I don't know if he's like, this is a story that I wanted to tell. So after we're done with this in-game style, in-game level event that we have, let me just leave. Because learning from Marvel, you don't continue a good thing. You just kind of leave it in legacy and you let it do its thing. If this universe turns out to be the greatest DC universe of all time, then or the greatest DC media universe of all time, then you just let it lie. Um, but to tie that all to Steel, we don't have a lot of time, especially with the number of projects they're releasing, and half of those being Elseworlds projects, and half of those being projects set in the DCU and not based off of Superman characters. So I would like to see him appear early on, maybe in whatever other project that James Gunn is writing that's based off of Superman or that's related to Superman, maybe a World's Finest or maybe a Superboy project or something like that. I would like to see John Henry Irons be inspired by Superman, and even if he doesn't take on the suit or the hammer or anything like that, I would still like to see him be like a construction worker who Superman has lunch with. Like I can just imagine it. Maybe there's like a scene
Right.
where Superman saves him and they have lunch or something on a crane or on the top of a building, and they just talk about what it means to be a working man in society, having to struggle for what you have, and then being the man who has
Cool.
everything. That
Yeah.
would be a beautiful thing, and that would also tie into why John Henry Irons looks up to Superman, and why Superman also looks up to John Henry Irons in a way, because he aspires to have that. He aspires to be like John, to work every day for what you have and earn it. You know. So.
I agree. I think the right approach would be to introduce him in a very small capacity, whether it's a
Mhm.
supporting character, even just like a very small supporting character, only a couple scenes. Introduce him, even maybe have a scene where Superman saves him as like a big thing, and you find out that it's his name is John or whatever. And
Yeah.
then when you're ready for that next step, have a post-credit scene or whatever it be of like John, working on something in his shop, and then you see
Yeah.
Superman on the news and stuff, and then it's like, okay, obviously we're gonna introduce Steel, but yeah, it doesn't have to be like hard launch. Let's get Steel out there. I think he's a character that you could pepper into the world and then see where he grows from there.
Yeah, because I think ultimately the theme behind John Henry Irons' character is more important than the mantle, if that makes sense. Like what
Oh
he
yeah,
means to Superman's world and what he stands for in his own right as a black man. You know what I mean? As a black superhero, when we have so little of them, when they are the minority in the universe, um, it is more important to have John Henry Irons there than to have Steel there.
I like that. I like that a lot. That's
Yeah,
I agree. I think there's a lot of potential to see where it goes. I don't think he's gonna be in this first Superman movie. I don't think
I
they have
don't
plans
know.
for him right now. But
Yeah.
let's see it down the line. And then again, yeah, let's get Shaq in there. Whatever it is, like he he needs redemption in the DC
He
universe
does.
for
He
everything.
does.
All right, we're gonna get into a couple pieces of news. We don't have a lot, so it won't be too long. The first one, unfortunately, is that Gene Hackman passed away at age 95. This one's just notable because obviously it is the Lex Luthor from the Christopher Reeve era. That's something that we're going to be exploring soon. He lived a very long life. It's not like it's like he was taken so young, but obviously when you see a legend go like this, you have to at least recognize it and say that he was the Lex Luthor for a long time.
Yeah, that you do. I mean, I don't have too much of, I guess, a history with Gene Hackman other than that Lex Luthor role, but I do
Mhm.
remember watching that Superman movie for the first time and being like, this is my definitive Superman and this is my definitive Lex Luthor. So it is sad, especially with the aspects surrounding his death are a little up in the air right now. So because it was
Yeah.
him, it was his wife, and it was his dog, right? So I just hope that he's in a better place right now, and I hope that they figure out truly what happened to him for sure.
Yeah. The second piece was that the Wonder Woman game, we talked about this in our second week or so, that DC video games were having a lot of trouble with all these studios, and the Wonder Woman game was getting reworked. It now
Yeah.
officially got canceled, and they're shutting down Monolith Studios, along with some other studios, including the one that did Multiverses. I'm just sad that this is going the direction it does. I don't understand what WB Games is going through. I don't understand like how we can get to a better point. But it just sucks to see something like a Wonder Woman game, which so many people loved the idea of. They were going to bring in that Nemesis system that people loved from the
Mhm.
Shadow of Mordor games. It felt like everything was set up for success. I just don't want to know, like, what happened. Why did this all fall apart? You know?
Yeah, that actually makes me like really upset because I want to see a game that is not Batman related. You know,
Same.
granted, when the next Batman game comes out, I'm gonna buy it and we're gonna have a lot of fun with it. But at the same time, there are so many other characters. Actually, in this big encyclopedia alone, there are 1,200 characters in it. You know what I
Wow.
mean?
Yeah.
And half of those are superheroes. So at least 600. There are at least 600 superheroes in DC in the DC universe. That have not been touched on other than Batman. Even like the big three, Superman has not had a game
Ever.
to yeah
Which is
ever.
crazy.
So Wonder Woman hasn't had a game, and like this is your Trinity. You know what I mean? These are
Yeah.
these are your three. Like when you think about DC, you think about these three. These are your three selling points. So it's like for only Batman to have had a game and for even like thinking about a trinity of sorts, Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man are like the trinity of superheroes, like period. You know what I mean? So for Spider-Man to have had Insomniac, for Batman to have had the Arkham series, and Superman not to have anything is just wild to me.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about the future of DC games and like my concerns of everything. Like on the horizon, I see not a lot of, like you said, stuff outside of Batman. I see more Fortnite skins, which isn't really a DC thing. It's just like
Yeah.
DC being around. I see Rocksteady working on something again, which will most likely be a Batman thing. That could be good, that could be bad, but like again, more Batman.
Yeah.
If they're doing another Lego DC game, it's going to be Lego Batman 4. So again, more
Hmm.
Batman. And even like if they've been talking about working with NetherRealm again to do Injustice, which again is another Batman focused thing. I wish they would take a chance and try something new.
Yeah, but I feel like unfortunately with Warner Brothers, they do value more money more than they value actually staying true to these characters, which is what has me so scared for the DCU, partly because um and I mean I know we shouldn't give rumors that much stake, but from what I've been seeing on like New Rockstars, because I think New Rockstars has a few contacts in the industry, from what they've been saying, you see some people who are saying that Superman is not doing good in the test screening route. It's doing okay.
Oh,
It's not
right.
doing great. So
Okay.
which is what makes me a little sad because, or a little worried, not sad, worried. Because it's like if Superman fails, then what? We
It's
don't
over.
see. Yeah, it's over before it's even begun.
Yeah.
And that is why it gets on my nerves. Like this whole corporation side of running a universe and putting out superhero content, just like the Flash game. And I know we talked about it on one of our previous episodes, but it's like just because that movie failed does not mean that the game will. It is
Right.
not. It is not. There are so many factors that were tied to that movie that weren't even related to the Flash character, like Ezra Miller being the main one, that may
Yeah.
have led to that movie not performing as well as it did. The Flash is not Ezra Miller. Ezra Miller was playing the Flash. Um,
Yeah.
so when it comes to like a character like Superman, or when it comes to these characters not doing good in other aspects of media, and therefore they not get a game, or they not get, their comic series just stops, like the Fantastic Four, after Josh Trank's little era. Um,
Yeah.
which fun fact, Fantastic Four I think has a lower rating on Rotten Tomatoes than Steel. Um,
Crazy.
I believe so. I can recheck to make sure, but yeah, I think that it is a crazy, frustrating thing that I wish we would just move out of, but knowing Warner Brothers, I
Yeah.
don't believe so.
Well, even when you like think about the early MCU, imagine if Incredible Hulk had came on a few months earlier and that was the first project that started, and then obviously that wasn't a big hit. And then they had stuff like Iron Man 2 and Thor and Captain America, which were all like modest successes. Imagine if they had given up, then we would have never gotten the Avengers, never would have gotten the runaway success of that universe. I'm
Hmm.
hoping DC doesn't do the same thing. I'm hoping DC sees, hey, people are interested in Superman, even if it's not a runaway success. And then we keep that momentum going. If people go see Supergirl, people go see Clayface. If people like the Lantern Show, then
Yeah.
if all those projects fail, like those four initial things, which I assume are some of the first stuff coming out, then maybe we can like talk about, is this gonna work or not? But
Hmm.
we got to give it a little bit of time, and I'm hoping
Yeah.
David Zaslav and some of those execs do that.
Yeah, I hope so. Also, I just checked. It has 1% higher. It has a 9%. Steel has an
1%.
8%.
Okay.
1%. It's still terrible, but yeah. Like
Yeah.
even with that, I hope that for the DCU's sake, if Superman comes out, because I can't lie, I am a little worried about Superman, especially with how long it took the trailer to come out, and how long it took, or how long it's taking the next trailer to come out. I am a little confused with their marketing strategy for this movie so far. We started out hot out the gate, with a poster, the picture, the score,
Yeah.
all this other
Right.
stuff, and now it seems like we've hit a standstill, and it feels like maybe the pressure might be on a little bit because we are getting closer, and because it is time for people to see, where the movie is. And then not only that, but this movie is sandwiched in between a Marvel movie, and it's between a Jurassic movie. Two
Yeah.
movies that, I mean, that's going to be some tough competition. And out of all those three, I'm sure the execs are expecting you to come out on top,
Yeah.
because we have failed with the DC movies for so long, you know?
It's a It's a tough order. I'm all credit to James Gunn. He's doing what he can. I will have to. I hope they just brought in a marketing executive for Superman who's worked on a lot of popular stuff with Star Wars and stuff. So I'm hoping that they ramp up. I assume they might wait till after the Warner Brothers Minecraft movie comes out in April because I know they are banking on that big. Yeah, everything aside,
Yeah.
um, I think if we don't see a lot of marketing once April hits with like April and May and stuff, then I'm pretty concerned. But right now, I'm gonna give it a
Yeah.
little bit more
Me too.
leeway. But our final thing, which I saved last just for you, is the first look at lanterns. We got
Uh
a very simple image of John and Hal walking down the road,
yeah.
not in any costumes or anything. I think they both, in terms of like hairstyles and like very simple things, look really, really cool for the characters. And
Hmm.
then obviously you see Hal having a Green Lantern ring, and they show it just enough so you can see to get people excited. It was simple. It reminded me a lot of Deadpool and Wolverine first look photo that they did a couple years ago, and it was
Yeah.
enough to get me pretty excited. Where I'm like, I'm happy, I'm excited. Let's get
Yeah,
it.
same here. When I saw that ring, I started jumping.
Yeah.
Even just seeing any bit of Green Lantern memorabilia, which is why I'm excited for our topic 2 weeks from now, Blackest Night, because it is
Yeah.
just I need more Green Lantern in my life. I do want to ask your opinion on this though. Does the ring look, and I know it was a very small, quick look at it.
Mhm.
Does it look different from Guy Gardner's ring? Do you
I
feel
haven't really seen Guy Gardner's ring. I don't know if have they done a lot of close-ups of it.
they haven't done any
I don't know
close
if
ups,
I've.
but like in the Superman trailer when he shoots it at the wall or when he shoots it at the door, whatever, you can see it for a split second.
Okay, I'd have to go back
Um
and look at
oh
it to
also
compare.
in the Super Bowl when he was like doing his hair, he was
Oh,
doing
you
it
can
with
see the
his
ring.
yeah, you can see the
Okay,
ring.
I'll have to
Uh
notice it more closely.
Yeah, it does look a tiny bit different, but part of me makes me wonder if I guess on a production design standpoint, is it maybe a thing of rank? Maybe like people because it seems like Hal Jordan's has like a little bit of a gold uh lining around it. So maybe since Hal Jordan is supposed to be a respected member of the Green Lantern Corps, he's supposed to be a
Yeah,
chief officer of the Green Lantern Corps, and John Stewart is like the trainee, the rookie of sorts. Is the color of your ring or the color of your band a sign of rank in the Corps?
that'd be
Potentially
interesting.
that would be an interesting thing to explore. Um,
Mm.
Unfortunately, hopefully James Gunn or whoever the writers are don't do this. I hope that Hal Jordan is not Parallax, and I more so hope that he is not committing these crimes and committing these superpowered murders and forgetting them and being like, and when he in the final episodes or whatever, when he finally realized that it's been him the entire time, we get a whole Parallax thing. I sincerely hope that's not the route they're
Yeah.
going. I really,
Uh,
really hope that's not the route they're going, but we'll see.
to clarify, listeners, parallax is when this alien entity kind of takes control of Hal and he becomes this genocidal warlord, and it
Yeah.
basically turns Green Lantern evil, which is a very controversial comic book run. I
Yeah.
I honestly think that could be where they're going. That's my concern too with an older Hal is that we're gonna go parallax, and we just saw that recently with the Green Lantern animated movie from a couple years ago. They did a run on parallax, and
Mm.
I could see him pulling it off somewhat well, but if we're just introducing Hal for the first time since the Ryan Reynolds movie, like let's maybe do a more traditional take on the character for a minute before we
Yeah,
go into that type of
yeah,
stuff.
because another thing that came out when Kyle Chandler first signed on, I don't know how DC does their contracts, but I saw this in like Variety, in a Variety article that apparently in his contract it only has this as his one appearance. It doesn't have any movies or anything like that.
Yeah,
Granted, I don't know how they do contracts. I don't know if it's like a one movie thing or like a one project
right.
deal, so you have time to go out and do other stuff, like make other movies, make an indie movie, and then come back to this
Mhm.
universe. But if they do a contract thing where they're like, okay, you have these three projects on your contract, and Kyle Chandler only has this one, it just makes me so scared for for this show. I mean, I think that's the theme with this universe. It's just I'm scared. I'm
That's
scared.
valid. I think they're gonna do some controversial things with Hal, no matter what. Because they're
Yeah.
gonna focus on Jon Stewart. Like that's gonna be their main Green Lantern, is my impression. Even though we have Guy Gardner in the Superman movie, and we're gonna see other core members. My impression is that you cast someone like Aaron Pierre to use him as one of your main Justice League members. So yeah, we'll have to see what happens with Hal. Even if it's something like if it's a one contract, he shows up in this show and then
Mm,
just kind of disappears because he's like a senior veteran. That's fine as long as I have a Green Lantern. To me is important. I just want to see
yeah,
someone
I'd
out
agree.
there, even if it doesn't. But yeah, I'm a little more sold on everything. I'm a little more sold on Kyle Chandler as Hal based on looks. I think they really are selling me on Aaron Pierre's John Stewart. I think it's gonna be a really interesting adaptation. And if it's on HBO, I have a lot more faith. And that about wraps it up for us. Next week, we don't have a piece of media we are looking at. Instead, we are going to do our very own draft day where we pitch various things of what we want to see and what we would do for shows and movies. So I hope you guys tune in for that. Thank you for listening to this one, and we'll see you soon.